If you keep living the way you are today, 5 years from now, you will regret it. Not the kind of light, fleeting regret, but the kind where you sit alone on a very ordinary evening, nothing special happens, yet inside you there is a very heavy feeling. You look back, not to remember, but to understand, and you ask yourself a question you don't want to answer. What did I do with all that time? You didn't fail. You didn't lose everything. You didn't fall into tragedy. But that's exactly what makes it scary. Because your life didn't collapse. It just stood still. And you realize one thing, you did not become the person you once thought you would become. Not because you lack ability, not because you lack opportunity, but because you procrastinated. You knew you should start. You knew you were wasting time. You knew you could do more, but you chose to wait. Wait for a better moment. Wait for the right feeling. Wait until you were ready. And while you were waiting, time kept moving. No one reminded you. There was no warning, no sound signaling that you were gradually losing your future. Everything happened very quietly, very normally. So normal that you didn't feel the danger, until one day you stop and you realize what makes you regret is not what you did wrong, but what you knew you should have done, yet didn't do. And the truth is, 5 years from now is being decided by what you do or don't do today. I want you to imagine a very simple scene. Nothing dramatic, no tragedy. Just a quiet room, a late afternoon, and a man sitting there, saying nothing. I have met him like that. He was not a failure in the way you usually think. He had a stable job for many years, a family, a house, a life many would call fine. But when he looked out the window, his eyes were not fine, they were empty. Not because he lost something, but because he realized there were too many things he had never started. He didn't say much, just quietly talked about small things. A business idea he once had when he was young, a book he always wanted to write, a trip he promised himself, a skill he thought he would learn when he had time. But do you know what the scariest part is? It's not that he failed at those things. It's that he never truly started. His life wasn't destroyed by one big mistake. It was worn down by many small delays. Not today, not tomorrow either. Next week is busy, next month is tiring, and then 5 years pass. No sound to signal it. No warning appears. Only time quietly passing by. You see, real regret is not loud. It doesn't scream inside you. It doesn't make you collapse immediately. It accumulates, like dust covering a mirror. A little each day you don't notice. Until one day you can no longer see yourself. I asked him one question. If you could go back 5 years, what would you do differently? He didn't answer right away. He was silent for a long time, as if searching through a life that had passed. Then he said very softly, I would start even just a little, not change his whole life, not do something great, just start. One small step, one small decision, one action he had delayed for too long. Think about it. How many people out there are living like him, not failing, not suffering, but also not moving forward? They live in a comfort zone that is just comfortable enough that they don't feel the need to change. And that is the most dangerous trap. Because when you don't feel pain, you won't act. And when you don't act, time will do the rest. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It doesn't wait for your motivation. It just moves. And every day you don't start is a day you move closer to the moment when you will sit down and ask yourself, what did I do with my life? I'm not telling you this story to make you sad. I'm telling it because I've seen too many people realize this when it's already too late. And what makes me think the most is not their regret, but it's silence. No one tells you that you're going in the wrong direction. There is no clear sign, only a very vague feeling that you could do more. But you ignore it. You tell yourself, later, and at that very moment, you begin writing the regret of 5 years later. And that's why the most dangerous thing is not failure, but living a life not bad enough to make you change, yet not good enough to make you proud. And from here, we have to face an even more uncomfortable truth. It's not that you don't have time, it's that you are using time as if it were endless. And that is the next lie that almost everyone has believed. Have you ever told yourself something very simple but extremely dangerous? I still have time. It sounds harmless, even reasonable. You're young. You're not at rock bottom. You still have opportunities. So no need to rush. I used to believe that. I remember a period in my life everything wasn't too bad. I was still working, still earning money, still living like everyone else. But deep inside, I knew I was delaying something important. Maybe starting something bigger, maybe changing environments, Maybe committing to a path I truly wanted. But every time that thought appeared, I reassured myself. It's okay, I still have time. Do you see what was happening? It's not that I didn't know what I needed to do. I knew very clearly. But I used time as an excuse not to act. And that is the most dangerous lie, because it doesn't make you feel guilty. It doesn't hurt you. It gives you a sense of safety, like you're standing on a long road and thinking, I can start any time. But the truth is, that road does not stand still. Time is not something you can save. It moves whether you use it or not. I met a young man working at a small company. He was smart, capable, ambitious. But every time I asked about his plans, he would smile and say, I'm preparing in a few years. I'll do something big. A few years from now. Sound familiar? I asked him, so what have you done today to prepare for that? He fell silent. Not because he didn't want to answer, but because he had never truly started. He was only thinking about it, talking about it, dreaming about it, but had never turned it into action. You see, procrastination is not doing nothing. It is often very well disguised. You read a little more, watch another video, wait for a more suitable moment. You feel like you're getting closer, but in reality, you are still standing still. And the scariest part is, you don't realize it, because you always have a reasonable excuse. I'm not ready yet. I need more time. I'll do it when things are more stable. Those sentences sound very smart. But if you look back after 5 years, you will realize those were not reasons. That was procrastination spoken in a very convincing voice. I used to wonder, why do people believe in this lie so easily? And then I realized, because it doesn't take anything away from you immediately. You can still live the same way, still feel okay, no immediate consequences, no immediate pressure. And because of that, it becomes extremely dangerous. It's like withdrawing small amounts of money from your account every day, nothing noticeable. Until one day, you look back and there's nothing left. Time works the same way. You don't lose 5 years in one day. You lose it little by little. Every time you say tomorrow is a piece of your future that just disappeared. And what makes me think the most is, no one forces you to say that. No one makes you procrastinate. You choose it. You allow yourself to believe that you still have plenty of time. But if you are honest with yourself, you will realize one thing. You don't know how much time you have left. No one does. Yet we live as if it were infinite. And that is the greatest paradox of human beings. We fear losing money, fear losing opportunities, fear losing people, but remain completely calm when losing time. And from that moment, a question begins to appear. If time is truly that valuable, why do we waste it so easily? Because there is something else that most people don't see, a cost that doesn't appear immediately. But when it arrives, it is too late to go back. There is something most people never see, not because it doesn't exist, but because it doesn't show up right away. You see, if every time you procrastinated, a door slammed shut in front of you, an opportunity disappeared right before your eyes, or a clear consequence happened immediately, you wouldn't dare continue like that. But life doesn't work that way. It is more subtle, more silent, and therefore more dangerous. I remember someone I once knew. He wasn't the lazy type. In fact, he was very hardworking. He went to work every day, completed his tasks, was liked by his colleagues. But there was one thing he kept telling me over and over for years. I know I can do more, but maybe not right now. Not right now. Sound familiar? He had a small business idea. Nothing too grand. Just a simple service that he understood very well. He researched it, thought about it, planned it, but he never started. Not because he lacked money, not because he lacked time, but because he wanted to wait for a perfect moment. A moment when everything was ready. A moment when he felt certain. And do you know what happened? Nothing happened at all. The next day, he still went to work. The next week, he still said, let's see. The next month, he got a bit busier. The next year, he forgot the original feeling. Everything happened very normally. No failure, no loss, no shock to wake him up. And because of that, he continued. That is the cost you don't see. Not a fall, but a standstill that lasts so long it becomes your life. Many years later, I met him again. Nothing had changed much. Same job, same life. But this time there was one difference. He no longer talked about that idea, not because he had done it, but because he no longer believed he would. Do you understand what that means? It's not that he lost the opportunity. He lost belief in himself. And that is the real cost. Because when you procrastinate for too long, you don't just miss actions. You begin to doubt yourself. You start to wonder, maybe I'm not that kind of person. Maybe I'm not capable enough. maybe I should live a safe life. And from there you shrink yourself. No one forces you to do that. You do it yourself. Little by little. I've felt that before. Not once, but many times. When you know you should do something, but you don't do it. The first day, you feel uncomfortable. The second day, you justify it. The third day, you start getting used to it, and then you feel nothing at all. You become fine, but that fine is not peace. It is numbness. You don't hurt, but you don't move forward either. You don't fail, but you don't live up to your potential either. And time keeps moving. Every day you don't act is a day you are paying an invisible price. You don't see it today. You don't feel it this week. But 5 years from now, you will look back and understand very clearly. Not because something big happened, but because nothing happened. You are still there. While life could have been very different, and what makes me think the most is, we always think the cost of procrastination is losing an opportunity. But no, the real cost is losing the person you could have become. And when you start to see that, another uncomfortable truth begins to appear. It's not circumstances holding you back. It's not other people, but something far more dangerous, comfort. There is something most people don't want to admit, that the thing holding them back is not difficulty, but comfort. Sounds paradoxical, right? We always think life being hard is the problem. That pressure, failure, lack are what stop us from moving forward. But if you look closer, you'll see something very different. The people who stay stuck the longest are often not the ones suffering the most. They are the ones comfortable enough. Enough money to live, enough work to stay busy, enough small pleasures to not feel empty, but not enough discomfort to force them to change. I've lived in that state before. Nothing was bad. And because of that, I had no strong reason to act. I woke up, worked, ended the day, and told myself, I'll do it when things are better. But do you see? When things are better is just another way of saying, I don't want to leave this comfort yet. Comfort doesn't drag you down immediately. It doesn't destroy your life overnight. It just keeps you where you are, like a soft chair. You sit for a while, it feels nice. Then you stay a little longer, then a little longer, until you forget why you needed to stand up. I remember a friend working at a big company. Good salary, decent environment, no overwhelming pressure. He once told me he wanted to start a business. He had ideas, plans, confidence, but every time we talked about it, he always ended with, maybe slowly, no need to rush. Year after year, that sentence never changed. Not because he didn't want to, but because his current life was comfortable enough that he didn't have to take risks. Do you see what's happening? He wasn't stuck. He chose to stay. And what makes me think the most is, he didn't feel stuck at all. He felt fine. That's the trap. Because when you feel fine, you don't question things. You don't push yourself. You don't step out of the familiar. You just continue, day after day. And then one day, you look back, not with shock, but with a very strange feeling. As if you had been asleep for years. You don't clearly remember what you did. You just know you didn't go as far as you once thought. Comfort has a very subtle way of deceiving you. It doesn't tell you to give up. It just whispers. It's okay to rest today. You can start tomorrow. You deserve to be comfortable. And little by little, it pulls you away from your best self. No pain, no clarity, but very certain. I once asked myself a question, and it kept me silent for a long time. Am I living a comfortable life, or a life true to my potential? Those two things are not always the same. And if you're not careful, you will choose comfort without realizing the price you're paying, not today, not tomorrow, but 5 years from now, when you look back and realize you didn't go as far as you could have. And from that moment, an image begins to appear inside you, not the person you are, but the person you could have become, and that is the most painful comparison. There is something I believe most people have felt, but very few dare to face. It's the moment you look at your life and suddenly realize, there is another version of you that never existed, not because it couldn't, but because you didn't take that path. I want you to imagine something, not vaguely in your mind, but very clearly, a person standing in front of you, same face, same voice, but different eyes, more certain, calmer, with the depth of experience. That is you 5 years from now. If you had started, if you had persisted, if you had not delayed the important things, that person is not perfect, but that person has gone further, learned more, become someone different, and then you look back at yourself. You see the gap, not a gap in time, but a gap in choices. I felt that before, not once but many times. When you see someone else achieve what you once thought about, you don't just admire them. A part of you goes quiet, not because they are better than you, but because, you could have been there, but you didn't go. It's a very hard feeling to name, not jealousy, not anger, but a very deep regret, like standing in front of a door and realizing you once had the key, but you didn't open it. I remember once meeting an old acquaintance again. Years ago, we started at the same point, same dreams, same desire, but then life took us in different directions. He started earlier, slowly but consistently. I waited for a better time, waited for better conditions, waited for the feeling of being ready. Years later, when I saw him again, I wasn't surprised that he was successful. What made me silent was the distance between us. Not a financial gap, but a gap in who we had become. He thought differently, acted differently, saw life differently. And me, I realized I was still standing near where I had started. Do you see that? Life doesn't just change your circumstances. It changes who you are, or it changes nothing at all. And that is what's frightening. Because if you don't actively grow, you are not standing still. You are falling behind. But you don't realize it because everything still feels fine until you see another version of yourself in someone else's life. And you understand that's not them. That's you if you had chosen differently. I used to ask myself, what creates that difference? Not talent, not luck. Just they started a little earlier, a little more consistent, and procrastinated a little less. Very small things. But when they add up, they create a completely different person. And this is what you need to understand. You are not just deciding what you do every day. You are deciding who you will become. Every time you procrastinate is a time you reject a better version of yourself. Every time you choose what is easy is a step further away from who you could be. And the most painful part is, no one else sees it. Only you. Only you know how much further you could have gone. Only you know what you missed. And one day, you will have to face the person you did not become. Not in imagination, but in a very real, very silent, and very deep comparison. And from that moment, you begin to realize something even more frightening. It's not that you missed one big decision. It's that you drifted little by little every day. No one wakes up one morning and decides to ruin their life. No one says, today, I will go the wrong way. Everything always starts small, very normal, almost unnoticeable. You wake up a little later. You skip something important just for today. You choose what's easier instead of what's right. Nothing serious. And that's exactly the problem. I used to think that life changes because of big decisions, a turning point, a bold choice, a special moment. But the longer I live, the more I realize a different truth. Life doesn't change because of one day. It changes because of repeated days. I remember once talking to someone working in a small shop. He wasn't lacking willpower. He knew what he wanted. He wanted to study more, change jobs, do something more meaningful. But his days all looked the same. Wake up, go to work, go home, rest. And then he told me, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm drifting off track. That's the exact word, because he didn't stop. He didn't fail. He was still moving, but in a different direction. Do you see that? You don't have to stop to get lost. You just need to drift a little, like a ship. If you change direction by just 1 degree, you won't notice immediately. But after some time, you will be in a completely different place. Life is the same. One small choice today doesn't create a big difference. But 1,825 days does. 5 years. You don't feel each passing day, but you will feel where you stand after those 5 years. I've felt that before. You think you're just a little lazy today, just resting a bit this week, just putting it off a little. But those little things don't disappear. They accumulate. And one day, you look back. You don't remember each time you procrastinated, but you see the result of it. You see the gap between you and where you want to be growing wider. And the scariest part is, you don't know exactly when you started drifting. There is no specific day, no clear decision, just days passing by, and you didn't adjust. I once asked myself a question. If I keep living like today, where will I be in 5 years? Not dreams, not plans, but reality. If you keep your current habits, your current way of thinking, your current way of using time, where will you end up? That answer often leaves people silent, because deep inside you know You know where you are going. You know whether you are getting closer or not. But you don't want to face it, because if you do, you will have to change. And change is uncomfortable. It requires you to leave what is familiar, face discomfort, step into uncertainty, and that is why many people choose to continue. Not because they can't change, but because they don't want to face the cost of change, but they don't realize the cost of not changing is always greater. It just comes later, much later. And when it comes, you no longer have the chance to fix the days that have passed. You can only look back and understand. Understand that you drifted, not because of one wrong decision, but because you didn't pay attention to the small ones. And from that moment, another truth begins to appear. Not all pain comes immediately. Some pain only shows up when it's too late to avoid it. There are pains that don't come when you make a mistake. They come afterward, much later. And that is what makes them heavier than anything else. You see, when you are disciplined, you feel discomfort immediately. Waking up an hour earlier is not easy. Turning down an invitation is not easy. Sitting down to do what you know you must do when you don't feel like it is even harder. The cost of discipline you pay right away. It is clear. It is specific. It makes you feel uncomfortable. But because of that, you recognize it. You know you are doing the right thing. But procrastination is different. It doesn't take anything from you immediately. It doesn't hurt you right away. You choose to rest a little more and you feel comfortable. You choose not to do the hard thing and you feel relieved. Everything feels smooth. And that is the biggest trap. I have chosen that comfort more times than I'd like to admit. Not because I didn't understand the value of discipline, but because the feeling of just later is so comfortable. You tell yourself, just today I'll do it tomorrow. Just this once it's okay. And it's true, nothing happens immediately. No consequences. No punishment. Just short-term comfort. But you don't realize what you just traded. You traded a little comfort for a part of your future. You don't feel like you lost anything because that loss hasn't arrived yet, but it is accumulating, little by little, like a debt you cannot see. You don't receive a bill every day. You don't see the number increasing, but it's there. And one day, you will have to pay. I once met a man in his middle age. He didn't talk about big failures, didn't mention serious mistakes. He just said one simple sentence. I wish I had been stricter with myself earlier. You might hear that and think it sounds light. But when I looked into his eyes, I knew it wasn't light at all. It wasn't a passing thought. It was a regret built up over many years. Every time he chose what was easy, he didn't see the consequence. But all those choices led him to the present. A present he knew could have been different. Do you see that? The pain of discipline only exists in the moment you experience it. But the pain of regret can stay with you for the rest of your life. One pain is quick but light. The other doesn't hurt at first but becomes heavy later. And people often choose the second one. Not because they are stupid, but because they don't see the true cost. They only see the present. They only feel the immediate emotion. And they believe if it doesn't hurt now, then it's fine. But life doesn't work on feelings. It works on consequences. You can procrastinate today and nothing happens. You can procrastinate tomorrow and still feel okay. But you cannot procrastinate forever without paying the price. And what makes me think the most is, when that price comes, it is not just a result. It is a feeling very hard to describe. Not physical pain, but a heaviness deep inside. You look back and you know you had the opportunity. You know you had the time. And you didn't use it. No one blames you. No one judges you. But you cannot escape yourself. And that is when you understand most clearly, the cost of procrastination is not failure. It is having to live with the question, what would my life have been like if I had done things differently? And from that moment, something else becomes clearer. It's not just what you do, but the people around you are silently shaping who you will become. There is a truth many people don't want to face, that your life is not only determined by what you do, but also by who you are around. You may think you are independent, that you have your own thoughts, that you are not influenced. I used to think that too. I used to believe that, as long as I had enough willpower, I could follow my own path, no matter what was around me. But then I realized something very simple and also very hard to accept. You don't become the person you want. You become the person your environment allows. Not in one day, not through one decision, but little by little. I remember a period when I spent a lot of time with a group of people. They weren't bad, not negative, just they weren't going anywhere. They talked about plans, talked about dreams, talked about what they would do, but rarely actually did anything. At first I just listened. I thought, I'm different from them, but then something strange happened. I started speaking like them. I'm preparing, I'll do it when the time is right. I'm not in a hurry, do you see that? No one forced me. No one told me to be that way, but I absorbed it. Like air, you don't see it, but you breathe it in every day. And gradually it becomes part of you. That's how environment works. It doesn't change you immediately. It just adjusts you, a little each day, a little in how you think, a little in how you speak, a little in how you act, and then you become someone else, without even realizing it. I once met a young person, very intelligent. He had ambition, capability, everything needed to go far, but he spent time with people who didn't have high standards. No one pushed him. No one challenged him. No one expected him to be better. And do you know what happened? He began to accept average as normal, not because he wanted to, but because that's what his surroundings accepted. Do you see that? You don't have to try to become average. You just need to stay in an average environment long enough, and it will happen naturally. On the other hand, I've also seen the opposite. Ordinary people who placed themselves in a high-standard environment. At first they felt out of place. They felt not good enough, but that forced them to change. They started thinking differently, acting differently, raising their standards. Not to prove anything, but because it was necessary to survive in that environment. I used to ask myself, why do some people change faster than others? Not because they are smarter, not because they are luckier, but because they put themselves in a different environment. An environment that doesn't allow them to keep procrastinating, doesn't allow them to stay the same. And this is what you need to understand. You are not just choosing your actions, you are choosing your environment. And when you choose your environment, you are choosing the person you will become. If you stay around people who always procrastinate, you will see procrastination as normal. If you stay around people who take action, you will feel that not acting is unacceptable. No one needs to tell you. You will feel it yourself. And then you will change. Naturally, silently. And one day, you look back. You realize you are no longer who you used to be. Not because you tried to change, but because you changed with the people around you. And that's when you understand something. You are not just living your life. You are being shaped every day by what you are exposed to. And if you don't choose intentionally, you will be carried along. Not in the direction you want, but in the direction that is easiest. And from there, a question begins to appear. If environment has that much influence, why do we rarely ask? Who am I surrounded by? Because the answer might force you to make a very difficult decision. A decision that many people are not brave enough to face. But if you don't, everything will continue as it is. Until one day, you not only realize you've wasted time, but you also realize you've become someone you never wanted to be. And that is usually the moment everything reaches its limit. The moment when you can no longer pretend that everything is fine. There's a moment that I believe almost everyone will go through. Not when you fail, not when you lose everything, but when you pause for a moment and truly look at your life for the first time. No distractions, no busyness, no avoidance, just you facing yourself. I call it the day you wake up. It doesn't come with warning, no clear signs. It might be a birthday morning. When you realize you've reached a new number, but your life is still standing still. It might be when you meet an old friend. Someone who started at the same point as you, but has gone much further. You talk, you laugh, but deep inside something goes quiet, or maybe just an ordinary evening. You sit alone, no noise, nothing to distract you, and for the first time, you cannot avoid the thought, where am I going? That question is simple, but heavy, because when you truly ask it, you cannot answer it casually. I've had that moment. No one told me anything. No major event happened. Just a normal day. But I felt something wasn't right. Not that my life was bad, but it wasn't what I once imagined. I looked back at the years that had passed, not to find faults, but to understand. And what I saw kept me silent for a long time. There was no big mistake, no obvious wrong decision. Just many times I didn't do what I knew I should do. Many times I chose what was easy. Many times I said later, and all of those times led me to this very moment. Do you see that? Not a fall, but a series of very small steps in the wrong direction. And what makes this moment uncomfortable is that you cannot blame anything. Not circumstances, not other people, just you. You and your choices. No one forced you to procrastinate. No one stopped you from starting. You had the time. You had the opportunity, but you didn't use it. And when you realize that, a very strange feeling appears. Not anger, not sadness, but a very clear truth. I wasted time. That sentence doesn't need anyone to tell you. You tell it to yourself. And once you say it, you cannot take it back. You cannot go back 5 years. You cannot fix the days that have passed. You can only face the present. And that is what scares many people. Because when you truly wake up, you have two choices. Either you change, or you continue, but this time, you know exactly what you're doing. No more unconsciousness. No more innocence. You know that if you continue like this, 5 years from now, you will return to this same moment, with the same question, with the same feeling, but heavier. And what makes me think the most is, most people have this moment, but not everyone acts afterward. Many people feel it, understand it, then go back to their old life. They get pulled back into habits, into environment, into familiar comfort. And that moment of awakening fades away, as if it never existed, until it returns again. But this time, it may be much later. And that is when you can no longer avoid it. No more comforting yourself. No more pretending. Because there is something you must face. Not other people, not life, but yourself when you look in the mirror and know everything here is the result of what you have chosen. There is a moment you can no longer avoid. Not when others point out your mistakes. Not when life pushes you into a corner. But when you stand in front of the mirror, just you and yourself. No one there to explain. No one there to comfort you. No one there to blame. Just one simple and uncomfortable truth. You are looking at the result of your own choices. I have stood in that moment. Not once. There were times I tried to stay busy so I wouldn't have to think. Times I told myself everything would be okay. Times I blamed circumstances, timing things beyond my control. But when you stand alone with nothing to hide behind, none of that works anymore. You cannot lie to yourself. You can deceive others. You can create an image. You can say you are fine, but deep inside you know. You know what you have done and what you have not done. You know the times you could have started but didn't. You know the opportunities you saw but ignored. And when all of that appears at once, you cannot run. That is the mirror I'm talking about. Not a glass mirror, but a mirror of truth. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't say you are wrong. It simply reflects, accurately, clearly, without hiding anything. And that is what makes it hard to face. Because when you see the truth, you have no choice but to accept it. I remember once asking myself a question I didn't want to answer. If my life continues like this, will I be proud? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I didn't want to say it out loud. But the silence said everything. Do you see that? There are questions that don't need spoken answers. As long as you dare to ask, you already know. And once you know, you cannot go back to the way you were. You cannot pretend everything is fine anymore. Because now you've looked into the mirror, and what stops many people here is not that they don't understand, but that they fear what comes next. Because when you truly see the truth, you must make a decision. No more staying in between. No more procrastination. No more later. Either you change, or you accept living with that result. There is no third option, and that is where many people turn back. They return to comfort, to old habits, to familiar environments, not because they don't want to change, but because change requires them to face themselves every day, requires them to do uncomfortable things, requires them to step into uncertainty, and that makes them hesitate. But you need to understand one thing. The fact that you have seen the truth is a gift. Not everyone gets it. Many people live their entire lives without ever truly looking into that mirror. They continue, they repeat, they drift until there is no time left to change. But you, if you are at this moment, if you have begun to see, then you are standing at a very special point. Not the end, but the point where everything can shift in a different direction. It doesn't require a big decision. It doesn't require immediate transformation. Just one thing, one very small thing, but enough to break the old trajectory. Because sometimes life doesn't change from a big leap, but from a very small decision made at the right time. And that is where everything begins to shift. There is a very common misunderstanding, and it has kept many people stuck for years. They think that to change their life, they need a big decision, a turning point, a bold leap, a moment where, from today, everything will be different. I used to think that. I used to wait for a strong feeling, a big enough motivation, a perfect enough moment so I could change everything at once. But do you know what happened? Nothing happened. Because those moments rarely come, and if you keep waiting, you will wait a long time. Until I realized something very simple, but it completely changed how I see life. Life doesn't change because of big decisions. It changes because of small decisions repeated. Not what you do once, but what you do every day. I remember someone I once met. He wasn't special, not more outstanding than others, no major advantage. But there was one thing that was different. He started very small, not a perfect plan, not a big step, just a little each day. Every day, he spent time learning, just a little, but consistently. Every day, he improved a skill, not much, but he didn't stop. At first, nothing changed. No one noticed, no clear results. If you look at a single day, you won't see any difference. But if you look at 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, you will see a completely different person. That is the power of a small decision. Not because it is big, but because it is sustained. Do you see that? The problem is not that you don't know what to do. Most people do know. You know you should wake up a little earlier. You know you should learn something new. You know you should start even if it's small. But you don't do it. Not because you can't, but because you think. Something that small won't make a difference. And that is the mistake. Because those small things are the only things you can do every day. You can't change your life in one day. But you can change a day. And when you change enough days, your life will change. I once asked myself, what stops us from starting something very small? Not difficulty, not lack of ability, but ego. We want a big change. We want fast results. We want to feel like we are doing something important. But life doesn't care about your feelings. It only responds to what you do repeatedly. One small step today, one small step tomorrow, one small step the day after. It sounds insignificant, but if you don't stop, it will take you very far. And the most important thing is, a small decision does not require you to be ready. It doesn't require big motivation. It doesn't require perfect conditions. You can start even if you're not confident, even if you're unsure, even if you can't see the full path, because you don't need to see the whole path. You just need to see the next step and take it. I've stood in front of big choices and done nothing. But the times I truly moved forward were when I did something very small. No one noticed. No one praised it. No one knew. But I knew. And gradually, it changed how I saw myself. I was no longer someone who would do. I became someone who is doing. That is the difference. Not in results, but in identity. And when your identity changes, your actions change. You don't need to force yourself anymore. You don't need to wait for motivation anymore. You act because that is who you are. And from there, everything begins to shift. Slowly, but steadily, quietly, but real. And if you can sustain that long enough, 5 years from now, you will no longer be the person looking back with regret. You will be the person your past self thanks. And from that moment, a very special image begins to appear. Not who you used to be, not who you are now, but the person waiting for you ahead, watching you, waiting for you, and asking a question you cannot avoid. I want you to pause for a moment and imagine something. Not vaguely, not as a passing thought, but clearly imagine there is a person standing in front of you, not a stranger, not an ideal model, but you 5 years from now. That person doesn't speak right away, just stands there looking at you. No anger, no blame, just clear, very real. And you begin to realize everything about that person is the result of what you are doing today. If you keep procrastinating, that person will carry regret. If you keep choosing what is easy, that person will live with what if. If you keep saying later, that person will pay the price. Do you see that? That person is not an idea. They are real. You just haven't met them yet, but they are being created every day. From your choices, from your habits, from what you do and what you don't do. I used to think that the future was something far away, a place you would arrive at. But no, the future is being built right now, not by big decisions, but by very small actions. You don't go to the future, you are creating it every day. And what makes me think the most is, the version of you 5 years from now has no voice. They cannot come back to remind you, cannot pull you in the right direction. They can only wait for you to decide, wait for you to act, wait for you to become the person they will have to live as. And the real question is not, what do you want in 5 years? But What are you doing to deserve that? Because desire does not create results. Action creates results. You can imagine a better life. You can talk about it. You can believe in it. But if you do nothing differently, 5 years from now, you won't be somewhere else. You will just be older. And that is the truth many people don't want to hear. Not because it's wrong, but because it's too clear. You don't need more knowledge. You don't need more motivation. You just need to start. One small thing. Today, no need for perfection. No need for certainty. Just real. Because the moment you act, you break the old trajectory. You tell yourself, I am no longer someone who procrastinates. And from that moment, a new person begins to form. Not in one day, not instantly, but little by little. And if you continue, if you don't stop, one day you will meet yourself again. Not with regret, but with a very different feeling. Gratitude. Gratitude that you started while you still had time. And that is the last thing I want you to remember. Time doesn't wait for you to be ready. Life doesn't wait for you to be perfect. But the chance for you to change always exists in the moment you decide to act. Not tomorrow, not when things are better, but right now. Because 5 years from today, you will look back at this moment. And you will know, this is where everything began. Or, this is where you missed it again. And if you've come this far with me, maybe you've started to feel something very clearly. Not pressure, not fear, but awareness. You see more clearly the days that have passed. You understand your choices better. And most importantly, you realize your life is not determined by circumstances, but by how you use your time. I'm not telling you everything will be easy. I'm not saying one decision will change everything instantly, but I know one thing for sure. The moment you stop procrastinating, the moment you start acting, even in a very small way, your life has already begun to shift in a different direction. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. You don't need to change everything. You just need to not continue the same way, because those same things are what brought you to where you are today. And if you don't change, 5 years from now, you will return to this same moment with the same question, but with a heavier feeling. But if you start today, 5 years from now, you won't ask, what did I do with my life? You will know, and you will be proud. So if there's one thing I want you to take away after this video, it is this. Don't wait until you're ready. Don't wait until everything is perfect. Don't wait until you feel right. Start before you feel comfortable, because that initial discomfort is a sign you are moving in the right direction. If this video made you think, press like so more people can reflect on their lives. If you want to continue this journey, press subscribe not to follow me, but to remind yourself that you decided to change. And if there's one thing I truly want to hear from you, leave a comment. What is something you know you need to start but have been delaying? Not to prove anything to anyone, just to say it to yourself. Because sometimes change begins with a very simple sentence. And finally, remember this. Success is not something you chase. It is who you become in the process of not giving up. I truly appreciate you staying until the end of this video.